Hi, guys. Welcome to the Simple Doesn't Mean Easy podcast. We are here every week working at simplifying things in our lives, one day at a time, one simple step at a time. I'm glad you're here today. My name is Michelle Visser. I'm your host. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that I've actually not heard anyone else talk about. It's a topic that I struggled with, that I just thoroughly did not understand for a long time. And I will be honest, although I'm going to tell you all that I've learned in the past few years from trial and error and from a whole lot of reading, I am nowhere near an expert on this topic. But I do have a guide for you to walk you through not only what we're talking about in this episode, but lots more details that I have discovered over the years. And what we're talking about is something that all backyard gardeners really should understand. We're talking about cover crops for a backyard gardener. Even if you only have some large pots that you grow plants on a back deck or a back patio, this will help you too. Um, so traditionally, cover crops are something that are used by large scale farms, and it allows them to let certain areas go completely fallow and plant cover crops there for an entire growing cycle. They'll do that. But a backyard gardener can't do that. We simply don't have the space available that we can just let a whole area go without planting, right? I mean, unless you want to take a year off from growing food, which I guess is certainly an option, it's never something I wanted to do. So, before we dive into this topic that I find really fascinating, I want to tell you a couple things. One, if you go to solelyrested.com/cover, COVER, you will find so much more than we're talking about in this episode, even. So, when you're done listening to this, go get even more details at solelyrested.com/cover. Also, this episode is brought to you by two sponsors who actually are very similar in a lot of ways. I'm so excited about both of these sponsors because I use their products daily. They both are women, mother owned companies. They both are out there literally hand making these products. And they both are very concerned about the quality of the ingredients that are going into their products in ways that I have not found replicated elsewhere. The first one is Hearth and Homestead Store. They do the most amazing things with tallow. They add medicinal herbs and just true good medicinal ingredients to everything they make. I use their serum. I think it's called Nectar. I use their tallow, and I absolutely love their magnesium. Is it called magnesium butter? It's a tallow with magnesium in it. Such good stuff. And there's so much more. I always use their soaps. In fact, I don't have any other soaps in my home. That's not true. Bill uses a store brand soap that I will not mention. But for all the soaps that I use, they are all from Hearth and Homestead Store. Be sure you use code SOLEY RESTED, SOULYRESTED, to save a nice savings on anything you want to try there. I can't recommend them enough. Also, Be Rooted Candle Co. I have linked to both of these wonderful companies and my favorite things from both at solelyrested.com/non-toxic. But in front of me, I have a Be Rooted candle, linen on the line. Smells so good. And this one is Fresh Morning. Also smells wonderful. The Fresh Morning, it gets me every time. So good. And then I wanted to tell you, they don't just make beeswax candles that are non-toxic, that also remove toxins from your air as you burn them. They also make wonderful room sprays. I love these. Only good, clean ingredients in them. And so many other things. So please go to solelyrested.com/non-toxic and check out both of these amazing sponsors. I can't say enough about them. So today's episode, I let's start off by telling you I have been growing cover crops for years, and I have been doing it in such a way that I haven't lost any growing area. Um, I guess I should put a little bit of a side note to that I'll come back to, but essentially I've done it in a way that has been so perfect for my backyard gardens. I'm going to give you kind of a history of what I've done, a little bit of history of what I've learned about cover crops, and then I'm going to wrap up with a summary of what I've done differently this year. This year, I've done a couple things completely differently, and I will explain that in just a little bit. So, for a backyard gardener, a cover crop needs to be a fast growing plant. They are going to either be legumes, grasses, or brassicas. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And you want to plant them in your garden's downtime. So this means typically like late summer or really early fall, like right around now, actually, is the time that it's ideal for a backyard gardener to do this. And it typically means getting plants out the second that they're done producing. In fact, some years I've taken plants out when I knew I might get a few more tomatoes or I might get a little more, some more beans producing on the vines. But for the most part, I knew it was just going to be a handful here and there. And it was worth it to me to get the plants out and let my soil start regenerating and improving because of the cover crops that I was planting. So my crop for the next year would be that much more productive for me. But typically, you can wait until your plants are done producing. You take them out immediately, and then you can plant your fast growing cover crops. Um, of course, in a warm climate, which I have no understanding of here in New England, we have a very short season. But in a warmer climate, when you have a very long growing season, I know a lot of people have two full crops. They plant in the spring, they harvest like midsummer, then they plant midsummer and they harvest end of fall. That idea is crazy to me. I can't even imagine. But if you are in a location like that, you certainly could choose one of those growing seasons to plant cover crops. So if you're in a warmer climate, you really can plant your cover crops whenever it's convenient for you. So the whole idea behind cover crops is what's going on behind the scenes. They're really hard workers improving your soil health and adding organic matter back into your soil and improving the actual structure of your dirt and making it more fertile. When it comes down to it, nothing is more important to a gardener than those things about your soil. And that is what cover crops give you more nutrient dense food in the end, because your food, even if your plant seems to be growing well and giving you the produce, if your soil is off, if your nutrients are poor in the soil, your food that you're getting is not going to have the quality nutrients that it can and that it would if your soil was providing the nutrients to the plants. And you're going to get a higher yield too. You're going to have more food coming from your plants if your soil is fertile and full of nutrients itself. Cover crops also create a healthier ecosystem in your soil, and they literally are food for the microorganisms and the worms that are so important to be providing food to your food. So I told you, did I tell you? I already forget if I mentioned this. There are three basic families of cover crops, and they offer different benefits depending on what you plant. They also offer different challenges too. And I know people don't admit this, but I think it should be talked about more. And I think it's the number one question I get. And I think it was the number one question I had about cover crops. There are disadvantages to cover crops. There absolutely are. And you need to weigh the advantages with the disadvantages, and you need to look at the disadvantages of each kind of cover crop to help you decide the best one for your situation. So we'll talk more on that in a minute. But these three kinds of cover crops are legumes, grasses, and brassicas. The legumes are infamous for adding nitrogen to your soil. The other kinds of cover crops are not going to do that for you. So if you take a soil test and you find that you are lacking in nitrogen, which is a common problem that leads to a lot of more common problems with your food, you need to consider planting a legume to help improve the nitrogen. For nutrients aside from nitrogen, grasses and brassicas thrive in the nutrients that they will give your soil. Now, there's also the benefit when you are terminating the cover crops. There are multiple ways. In fact, I'm not going to even get into that today. I think I explained 5 different ways you can terminate your cover crops in my guide to cover crops for a backyard gardener. Again, you can get that at solelyrested.com/cover. It's just linked right there for you. Grab it, read it, learn all the good stuff. But depending on how you're terminating them, both legumes and grasses are going to give you a wonderful mulch material that you can use all season long in your garden, which is something that's also really important to your soil health. And on top of that, grasses specifically will really help with erosion. That's a problem I have in my gardens because we have a slight slant everywhere on our property. No matter where you are, there's some sort of a slant, like nothing is level. My gardens are the same. So grasses will help with that if you're planting them as a cover crop. And then finally, aerating the soil is so important. My soil, I'll tell you more about this in a minute, is so compact. And there are certain grasses and brassicas that will help a lot with aerating the soil because the roots are hardy roots or they're ones that trail out really well and they're going to help give air and break up that soil. Now, I should say that legumes, I mentioned that, they're the nitrogen fixers, but you do have to inoculate your legume. And that sounds so like Star Trek sci-fi or so maybe bad. Oh, I have to inoculate them. But it's a really good thing and it's not hard at all. But the first year I planted some legumes, I didn't know that. So I lost a whole lot of nitrogen fixing abilities that plant would have had because I didn't inoculate them. So you do want to check into that. If you're looking for nitrogen fixing plants, you want to inoculate them. Go to solelyrested.com/cover. And actually, if you go to solelyrested.com/soil, that gives you even more information about the soil itself and soil testing and inoculating. So that's where you should go if you want to know more about that. solelyrested.com/soil, SOIL. Okay. You also can read a lot more about all of those 3 different cover crop options. I even break down my personal favorite plants in each of those categories and tell you why those are the plants that I like to plant for cover crops for each of those reasons. So all of that I break down in my ultimate guide to cover crops. Okay, I told you I would share disadvantages because I really don't want to ever be the one that's over here romanticizing or sugarcoating anything, whether it's real food that I'm buying, eating, or growing. I want to be real about it. So, cover crops absolutely probably will shorten your season. You might find yourself having to pull out summer crops before they're totally done producing if you want your cover crop to be able to grow to any height whatsoever or any maturity whatsoever, you might need to terminate some good plants. And that's a huge disadvantage. One tip I will give you for that, I am very happy to take out the plants that are done and leave the plants that aren't done. So I will plant my cover crops right around the well-producing plants in my garden, and I'll leave the ones that I really feel I don't want to miss out on the food they're still going to give me. So you can do that. You don't have to be overly, I don't know, a clean freak about your garden and clean it all out at once. You can leave the things you want to leave and plant the cover crops around in the rest of the areas. Also, another disadvantage is I already told you this, they work better for sure for gardeners in the South who have a longer growing window. And even in our northern climate, I do find the cover crops have enough time to make a nutrient difference in my soil, but I've never seen them grow to maturity here in a northern climate, except for this year. I'll tell you more about that. But first, I want to tell you the third disadvantage. They can lead to an infestation of sorts. They can lead to um, next year's garden having whatever the cover crop is that you planted coming up all over the garden in places you do not want it coming up, and you have to keep terminating it just like weeds. And that can be a big pain. But a tip on that is if you don't let your cover crops go to seed, if you're really particular and you're really careful about it, and you notice when they're starting to bloom, and you make sure that you either deadhead them or terminate the cover crop before they bloom, then you're never going to have this problem. But, that sounds so easy. If you've been a gardener for any amount of time, things like that sneak up on you. You blink or you just turn around and you turn back and boom, it's already gone to seed. So it sounds simple. It's not always simple. And that is a definite negative to cover crops. So what did I do? What did I do? What did I do differently this year? First and foremost, I decided that this year I was going to take a small area of just one of my gardens. I have 3 different beds. One of those beds, I was going to pick an area and plant a cover crop in just that section. My thought, let's see if I stick to it. Who knows? But my thought is I will rotate and move this section. It'll probably take at least a decade if I continue in this path before the entire garden has had a cover crop section that has gone fallow, because I chose a small area. I didn't want to give up too much growing space, but I thought, I'm going to try. I'm going to see if I stick to this. I don't know. Ask me next year. We'll see. But I think I might stick to this. And I planted mustard in just that small area. So the negatives are, one, for some reason, the mustard grew insanely fast. I was actually very sad. Like, it was mature really early in the summer. And I'm going, well, pooey, if I had known it was going to grow that fast, I would have planted it later. I would have put something else, a crop that's done early, like a lettuce, and then planted my mustard. But no, here I am out there in early May planting my cover crop that I could have just waited, planted something else, and still had the same amount of mustard. But it might have just been a fluke with our growing season this year. It was an unusual growing season. Another problem I ran into is what I just said, that I wasn't on top of making sure it didn't go to seed. And every time I was out there, I'd be plucking off some of the blooms with my thumb and my finger, just plucking them off as I walked by. But I didn't always get them all. And I'd come back and I'd be like, oh, darn it, that one went to seed. So I'm definitely going to have some volunteer mustard plants coming up in this area next year. Hopefully not too many. But the good thing is, it went to maturity. And I did eventually, after a few weeks of being silly and just plucking off the blooms, I eventually got to the point that I went down with my scissors and I totally terminated that entire section of mustard. I laid it down on the ground, which is one of those 5 ways of terminating it. I just cut it at the base and laid it all down. It has laid there all summer since then, just dried up like a grass, laid there like a mulch. And that entire time, whenever it rains or it gets water on it or it gets the morning dew, the nutrients from those drying up mustard plants are going into my soil. Also, because of the mulch area, I don't have any weeds growing there. So extra bonus. And so far, I'm really happy with what I did. So I think I'm going to continue. And the other thing I did, never done this before. Remember, I told you that cover crops can be good for aerating the soil. It's definitely a problem I have. I don't have raised beds. I just have ground that I walk on 8 times a day some days. And I do crop rotation. And I'm continually moving the location of everything every year, including my walkway. So even the path that's walked on the most gets moved around. So the whole garden has been walked on a lot and the soil is very compressed. So any cover crop that I can grow that's going to aerate the soil and break it up some is going to be really good. So this year, in just one of my beds, just along the walkway, I planted beet seeds. I'm afraid I might have not planted them early enough. I think it was maybe the third week of August. Beets, from what I'm told, I've never grown them, are a very fast growing plant, but so far they're only like an inch tall. So I wish I had planted them sooner, because where I put them, they could have went there in the beginning of the summer. Like I could have put them there anytime, because they're along the edges of the walkway in one of my beds in my medicinal drink garden. And which, by the way, I'm going to use the beets for beetroot powder, and I put that in almost all my drinks. You can barely taste it or not taste it at all. And it's so good for you medicinally. And if I put just a tiny little bit, I can just put it in all my drinks, don't even notice it. And I'm getting more than a teaspoon of it every day. I'm not a fan of beets themselves, but I'm a huge fan of the medicinal benefits of getting my beets that way. So it was appropriate to put them in my medicinal drink garden, because that's exactly what I'm going to do with them. Anyway, so those are the two things I did differently this year. And I'm, for the most part, pleased with what I did. Maybe ask me again in 4 or 5 weeks about those beats, and we'll see if I have anything to show you for them. But you learn every single time you do something. You're learning, right? So if it was a mistake, I learned how not to do it next time, and I'll try again. But that's what I wanted to tell you, that there is hope. Backyard gardeners can grow cover crops. It is a wonderful way to improve your soil. And even though there aren't resources out there, I have written the guide specifically for backyard gardeners that I would love for you to dive into and take advantage of. And let me know what you're planting for a cover crop this year. Um, let's see. You know what? One more thing. I will tell you, I should have said this in the beginning. I get my cover crops at True Leaf Market, and I have a special code for you. Um, you know what? If you go, I don't want to say the code wrong because I don't have this in my notes, but if you go to that page I've been mentioning the whole episode, right at the top, it's going to tell you how you can take advantage of the savings if you want to buy some cover crops, stock up on them. Remember, if you're getting legumes that you're using for nitrogen fixing, to also get some inoculating powder to go with them. Just side note. And definitely take advantage of that code there. It's $10 off of every $50 purchase. So take advantage of that. SoullyRested.com/cover. And that's it for today. Thanks for joining me, guys. And remember, it is easy to forget how blessed we are to live this life. So enjoy the simple, everyday efforts. It's not always easy, but it is a good life.